the Everyday Buddhist group for this invitation. I'm happy to share my thoughts on very important topics of Amida Buddha and Nembutsu, Namo Amida Buddha. And I want to make something clear at the beginning about my intentions. What I'll be saying is not an alternative to the traditional teachings. I feel that it is an expansion. In other words, to broaden our grasp of what Amida Buddha might be and what this Nembutsu, Namo Amida Buddha might mean to us. And so it's not an alternative, it's just an additional way we can grasp the experience of these words. I've heard, and I think many others have heard, that the traditional teachings are somewhat difficult to understand, and it's been difficult to explain by many ministers, and there's a reason for that. And I think the two reasons I cite is that there's a difference of time and culture. Difference of time, Shinran lived 800 years ago, and it was a completely different environment. To give you an example, anyone under 30, if I were to explain, if you had an emergency, you'd take a dime, find the phone booth, look up in a phone book, put your dime in and dial for help. I think anyone under 30 really wouldn't know what I'm talking about. And that's only been, the last 50 years. And here we're talking about 800 years or 500 years ago when some of these things were written. And so at that time, the conditions were so different. I've had a lot of medical issues being at my age, and any one of these would have caused me to die. I've had bladder cancer, heart issues. I fell, broke my elbow, broke my leg. 800 years ago, this would mean that I would not be able to work, and my family and I would probably perish. But here, we're not so concerned with that. At that time, because of the familiarity with death, which was all around us, the concern was afterlife. So it would be difficult to improve your life during that lifetime. And so an emphasis was placed on the afterlife. And so much of what we hear is about the afterlife. Now today, I think if we were had an illness or an accident, and we got to the hospital, I think we would live. So our concerns are more about the quality of life. When we're served a meal, we might complain about the taste or the service. And so there's a difference in our values here. And so what we're concerned with and what Shinran talked about, this is our founder, talked about awakening in this life, not so much about the afterlife. That will take care of itself if we become aware in this life of what the Nembutsu means to us. Now, and the other difference is cultural differences. And here in America, religion is kind of based on a template of Christianity, which is based, I think, more on faith, belief. And there is judgment. I think people come to Buddhism sometimes because of this sense that they're being judged by a deity. In Buddhism, we talk more about the description of truth, and we have a choice, where I think in other religions there's a prescription. In other words, this will happen if you do this, and you have to obey these laws. And so there is this difference and confusion that enters our lives when we try to really understand and experience what Shin Buddhism is talking to us about. So I'll talk about what the Buddha, historical Shakyamuni Buddha, what happened to him. As a prince, he was enlightened. But rather than depend on I think the custom of the time, where unknowns were always kind of given the cause as deities, he based the resolution of things like sickness, old age, and death on natural laws. Natural laws are what happens all the time. It's like gravity. Now, we don't have to really understand the details of gravity, but we know that if we jump from a 10-foot cliff, we might break a leg. But if we jump from a 100-foot cliff, we'd probably die. So Buddhism gives us truth, what is, and we have the ability to choose. So I think a modern definition of Buddhism could be put in these terms. And let me put up this slide here. I think that what the Buddha did, the historical Buddha, when he was enlightened, was he was awakened to truth. And so we might think of things as Buddhism being a process or practice of awakening, and awakening to align the mind with truth. Process could mean a practice. Awakening could mean a realization. Aligning the mind would mean I may have to change my mind. And in Buddhism, the mind is actually defined not just the cognitive, thought, but also the mind, the body, feelings, and spirit. Another word might be being, B-E-I-N-G, to define the mind. So it means aligning our whole being with truth. Truth is a big word, and we might not realize that we can only perceive part of its truth. And so what the Buddha talked about was that truth might be described by, let's say, 6 blind men describing the truth of an elephant. Now, one blind man might say the truth of an elephant is like a spear, touching the tusk. Another might say, no, it's a big leaf, like the ear. And another might say, no, this blind man says, an elephant is a hose. No, it's like a rope. And the man hugging an elephant's leg would say, an elephant's truth is like a tree trunk. And another pressed against the body would say, no, the elephant is like a big wall. And so we have these different descriptions of what we think is truth. But in fact, this is how we might see the world. We see it in a way and we think that we're seeing the whole truth, when in fact, what we're doing is just seeing part of it. And sometimes we hear that becoming a Buddhist means that our goal is to be a Buddha. Now, let's think about that. Does anyone play an instrument or play a sport or even cook, drive a car? Are we the best at that? If we played an instrument, are we like Yo-Yo Ma? Or driving a car like Mario Andretti? Or playing football like Tom Brady? Or cook like Julia Julia Child? All these things, of course, these people are known to be at the top of their game. And if we do these activities at our level, we're not, fooling ourselves and being so great. So I ask, how can we expect to be a Buddha at the spiritual level when, we can't even do these practical things? Now, we can't even think about becoming the Dalai Lama. But what we can do, and this is what Shinran said, because this might be the goal of monks, but for the average ordinary person, our founder realized that we might become awake to parts of the elephant, and we can experience parts of truth. And that will give us confidence that there are other things that we could really have trust in. And so I would like to start at the practical level. This is the level of, something we do all the time. And Nembutsu is our path to this deeper and higher spiritual level. But let's explain some things. That my main point in doing this presentation is to really make the point that we are spiritual beings. We're more than bodies. And I hope to make that point. So in ancient times, as I said earlier, unknown truths were kind of attributed to deities. If you had earthquakes or storms in Hawaii, you would say that Pele caused volcanoes, and ocean-going fishermen and so forth would depend on deities to make sure they had safe passage. So usually events, natural events and even human behavior was, pointed toward deities. And this is the language of ancient times. And Shinra has written, and we follow his words, but let's follow some of the things he said. And in one passage he says, "O Buddha, the wisdom of immeasurable light, whose body is like a mountain of pure gold." Now, again, references are made all the time, and Buddha sounds like a deity. And it's important that we do accept the Buddha in human form, As you see here, this is the Obutsudan, or my home altar. And we often see a picture or a statue of Amida Buddha. And this is very powerful. The statue is actually leaning forward, indicating that truth moves toward us. And his robe is open at the chest, meaning that his heart is open to us. The hand mudras is this indication that we're accepted just as we are, that we'll be grasped, never to be let go. We will be liberated. So all these signs tell us that we are included in this human environment. It's very powerful to have a human accept us just as we are. And we often hear that Amida Buddha is like the compassionate heart of a mother. So, again, this is powerful for us. But for many people, I think younger people, we're finding that religion is not so popular anymore. All religions in Europe, in the Americas, wherever. And one of the reasons is that I think we feel we're too sophisticated to believe in these deities controlling our lives. And so we have to realize that this is a major theme in life. And yet the Buddha is not a god. And what I said earlier was that the historical Buddha based his resolution on natural law. So let's see what he said about Amida. Amida is a Japanese word that combines two Sanskrit words, Amitabha, which means immeasurable light, and Amitayus, limitless life, light and life. And it's combined in the Japanese word Amida. So we often hear that, the Buddha is light and life. And light was used as a representative of energy. They didn't have very many words for energy. And so light, of course, was all around, and this is what the Buddha indicated. Now, I'm using the word energy because electricity is a form of energy. And I think using electricity, I hope to make an analogy with the spirituality that we might relate to. And so we can understand that there is something that we accept that we're using all the time. Now, think about a century ago. Did people think that what we're doing right now was possible? That you could actually talk to people, hundreds, thousands of miles away and see their face and hear their voices? That would be magic. And religion was thought that way. And yet, what are we doing right now? People are on different parts of the globe. Someone's in Japan, other states, different time zones. And we're doing this, electronically. So there is something that the ancients really couldn't depend on. But now we have energy in the form of electricity. Now, when we see each other or watch TV or use the internet, we're watching and speaking with each other, but we're not thinking about these electrons bouncing off satellites. The same with television or whatever form we use. And the same might be true with the spiritual energy, that it exists, it's invisible. And yet we tend to disregard or downplay its part of us. We look so much at what we can feel, which is the body. And going back to science, I want to point to Einstein. And again, this is now people might get sleepy here, but Einstein said mass and energy are two forms of the same thing. Now, this may be true. We don't think much about this, but this is true of all things. So instead of going through a whole lot of things, I'm going to use something we're more familiar with. I'll just say this at this point and come back to this, but our bodies might be considered mass, and this energy we could consider spirit. So we have two forms of body and spirit, and that's the point I want to make. But getting back to mass and energy, to explain it in a way that kind of makes sense on an everyday level, when we burn a limb, a log, what do we get? We get heat and light. Now, what is that? That's energy. That energy comes from that log. Now, where did that come from? Well, we can think that a tree's seed takes in and receives what? Light, water, nutrients. And so it takes in energy and it builds its mass. So it takes its other form, the form of energy, builds its mass of the trunk, limbs, leaves, and so forth. And so as it grows, it takes in all this energy, which it keeps. And then when we burn that log, it releases that energy. So this is a simple form which is true all the time. We're using gasoline, all this energy to supply the needs we have in everyday life. And as humans, we have a similar thing. We have this little infant. And what do we do with our energy? We take it in the form of milk, water, light, nutrients, and we grow to this adult you see on the other side. And it is this life energy that's part of us. Now, as humans, we have a unique part of energy, and we call it consciousness. And this consciousness is this ability, in a sense, to choose. We have ideas, words, concepts, feelings. We have action. We have spirit. All these things we can consider energy because it's not mass. Right now, we're not exchanging body parts. We're exchanging energy. So this is just a different way of seeing what we're doing all the time and bringing this idea of religious spirituality into a realm which I think we're familiar with, which is just regular energy. Now, later, I'm going to use the word spirit more, but I hesitate to use it at this time because I think we're familiar with energy in the form of electricity, but spirituality is a little vague and different people have different ideas of that. So my question, and I'll ask you in just a minute, can we agree that energy is one of the forms of Amida? Because we have other description or representations of Amida Buddha. In our altars, we have flower and candles. We have on many scrolls the 6 kanji characters, Namo Amida Buddha. And we have words such as Tathagata, wisdom, compassion, Namo Amida Buddha, or the shortened chant, Namandavs. We talk about infinite life and immeasurable light. So we have all these other descriptions of Amida. And so my question, I'll open this up here. Okay, just want to ask people what their thoughts are on this. What are your comments on the thought of Amida being described or having life energy as a representation of truth or Amida? Now, the Nembutsu is this, I am one with Amida Butsu. The definition I'm using here, Namo, often we hear that is, I take refuge. I'm using Bishop Tsuji, who was the first English-speaking bishop in America. But his definition, one of his definitions is Namo as being, I am one with. And if we look at Amida being life energy, it is that I am one with life energy. And Buddha means that I'm awake to that, I'm aware of that. So what I'm saying here is that this definition could be made that life energy flows through me, and I'm aware of that. And the next question is, where does this come from? We hear it is Amida, but Mitsuo Aida has this poem called Ancestors, and he tells us where we might think about this. He says, my father and mother, altogether 2, parents of my father and mother, altogether 4, parents of parents, altogether 8. If I count in this way back 10 generations, altogether 1,024. What about back 20 generations? To my surprise, over 1 million people. From the infinite past, a life relic baton has passed on. Here now, I live with my baton. This is your life. This is my life. And so what we're hearing here is that we have this life rally baton, which we could say is this life energy, which we call Amida. And it comes from what our parents, our ancestors. And if we think about it again in scientific terms, it goes beyond that. He's saying it's only 20 generations and there are over 1 million individuals that made each one of our lives possible. So again, through science, we know that, well, we're told that there is a Big Bang that happened 14 billion years ago. And apparently about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was formed, somehow off of a star, the sun. And again, somehow 3.5 billion years ago, life began. Now, we're not sure exactly how, but we began the ability to reproduce ourselves. You know, from an organic ooze, there came out some single-cell animals and eventually multi-cell plant life, eventually creatures. There could be sea creatures and eventually fish, which evolved into reptiles. And we know that we had dinosaurs, birds, we have mammals, primates, and out of that came us humans. So we've had our form for about 100,000 years. And most of that time we were like animals. And yet somehow there came a time where we had this thing called consciousness, where we were able to look at ourselves. And this is what is important. We have the term, Namo Amida Buddha. And what we become aware of is this: our human biological birth is when we receive life energy, this Amida. And if we're aware of that, we might think about this birth into Pure Land, meaning that our biological birth was a birth into this potential Pure Land. Pure Land, I like to translate in terms of pure realm. A realm could be thought of as a state of mind. So we are in this pure realm when our mind, our being, is aligned with truth. And this is what I feel Shinran could have indicated when he says that this is a real life event. It doesn't have to be an afterlife event. But when we align our mind, our whole being with truth, we are born in the Pure Land, and we've had a biological birth. And so this term, Butsu, is the key part. I am awake. Buddha was awake to this. Many animals realize that they have life energy, and it flows through them, and we see, life all around us. But I think humans are the only ones who have this ability to be aware. And with this awareness, in Shin Buddhism, we have ritual, we have this religion that has us think about this, because it's saying, I wake up to this life energy. And again, this is where I'd like to, have a discussion on this whole thing about Nembutsu, whether people think about this issue of life energy, of waking up to it. Does that help to realize what this, birth in the Pure Land might be, what this awakening is? I have a little suggestion of using thank you or gratitude to really wake us up to all the benefits we are receiving. So I think in Shin Buddhism, there's a lot of thought, of course, in America, of our achievement and how do we achieve enlightenment, awakening, and so forth. And I think what Shinran is telling us is that in ordinary life, by saying thank you, realizing all the benefits we have, and that's put into the words of the compassion of Amida, we realize all the gifts of life. And one little exercise I recommend is every time you come to a stoplight, and what you might usually say, instead of saying those words, you say thank you. And the reason you say thank you for the red light is that traffic in the opposite direction or the crosswise direction has the green light that says go. This is interdependence. You may not like the red light, but that green light allows others to go. This is how we interact with each other all the time. My benefit, someone else's benefit. It may seem in opposition, but it's in coordination. And so this is a thank you for the gifts of life, or things like electricity, the Zoom meeting we're having now. Now, getting that as a part of our life, gratitude leads to a life of gratitude. We start to substitute thank you with Namandavs, the chant, Namandavs, Namo Amida Buddha. And that brings us to the gifts of life. The fact that we were born in this impossible time, impossible odds, and we received this. We did nothing to really gain this. We got it because others really contributed this to us. And so we say, thank you, to our family, we received this. And Ida's poem reveals this, that, it's taken 1 million ancestors with only 20 generations. Think again, as I said, it's taken, the whole evolutionary process. And again, as Shin Buddhists, we really honor this and have this in our ritual, because when we receive this gift of life energy, we say Namo Amida Buddha, and we realize we have it. Well, we had it, from our ancestors, but when people pass on, we're still connected with that life energy. We're still connected spiritually, not physically, because the body is gone. But this is where Shin Buddhist ritual really enhances this. We have Obon, and we're now in the season of Obon. What are we doing here? We're thanking our ancestors, not sadly, but with joy, because we know that our past loved ones may have danced with us. Not only that, people back 100, 200, 500 years may have danced like this. And so we honor that. There are other things that we do as Shin Buddhists. Our services, people think we have so many memorial services that focus on death. What we're focusing on is our connection that still exists. We have the annual Obon. We have a monthly service, Shotsuki, where people who passed away in the month of June are honored, and families come to burn incense. We have these services after the passing of a loved one, the first year, third year, 7th, 13th, 17th, and so forth. These are to remind us that people have passed away, but they're still in our memory. And the children who never knew some of these people are ingrained in this thought of this connection, the spiritual connection of life energy, of Amida. And so in our home Obutsudans, what do we have often? This is our home altar. We have photos of those who have passed on, not so much inside, but around the home altar. Again, to remind us. Why do we clean up grave sites and bring flowers? This is our way of affirming that the spirituality exists and we're still connected. And I want to just affirm that these are not just rituals that we do without thought. This is affirming that we are part of the spiritual nature. And by doing that, we have the spiritual nature now with our body. So what we do with it is help others wake up. This is the primal vow, that as we wake up, we become what we might call bodhisattvas, and what we're about is helping others to wake up. Why? This is to resolve all these issues of sickness, old age, and death. Death is coming, but we realize it continues in the form of Amida Buddha, life energy. And so this is just another way of describing that. To kind of finish up here, we have this life energy, and it comes from what? The emptiness of the universe. We think about how our lives, can live, and we're thinking only of our present condition. But if you think about the universe, it's vast, and we're this little planet circling this one sun that's in a galaxy of billions of stars. And I understand that there are billions of galaxies in this universe. And so it's impossible to be born a human being. And we see this in the three treasures every week when we're at service. Rare, difficult, and wondrous is it to be born into human life. Now we live it. Rare, difficult, and wondrous is it to hear the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma. Now we hear it. So we have this teaching that helps us wake up to this rare event. And what do we do with it? We serve others, not for merit, but because we realize we have already received these things. And so this is how I feel that the primal vow enlists us to serve others. And so again, what I'm saying here is what I'm saying is not, it should not be taken as solid, that it's like everything else, representative of a truth, only part of this elephant. So I'll close with this. You know, this thought that the me is actually we. Immediately, when we're born, we're part of a family, but we're part of every other group, you know, whether it's a community, a sangha, but we're part of the earth. And that's why we have eco-sangha, to make us aware of that. We are part of this political system. And what we might become aware of is that although we feel we're affected by the greater whole, because we have this body and this mind, this consciousness, we can affect the whole. And I think that's what Shinnam was about. It's not just to sit in meditation, but it's to actively, with the body, go out and teach others this awareness, this awakening to truth. And here we are, this planet Earth spinning around the universe. And let me end with a writing by Dr. Taitetsu Uno in his book, River of Fire, River of Water. And he writes this: the fundamental purpose of the name as Namo Amida Buddha is awakening to the incomparable worth of this unrepeatable life, this limited finite life that is inseparable from boundless infinite life. I want to just repeat that again. The fundamental purpose of the name as Namo Amida Buddha is awakening to the incomparable worth of this unrepeatable life, this limited finite life that is inseparable from boundless infinite life. And so with that, again, my intention was to really encourage people to think about the fact that we are part of part spirit, and that our contemporary interpretation of Amida Buddha as life energy may help us substantiate that our true reality is that we are part of spirit, and this is true in our modern life. So with that, please join me in expressing our deepest sense of gratitude with the Nembutsu. Gassho, Namo Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha.